Alright, how to sharpen a stone blade or a stone point. Okay, let's see. We're going to do beveling on this video. But first I need to prepare this little chunk of stone. Or maybe I should use something like this. It's not that difficult to sharpen a stone, since when it breaks, it leaves a sharp edge. What's difficult is to resharpen. So, a stone edge that got dull. Right? Or maybe it's a mystery in no matter what. I don't know. When I first started, sharpening was not a big deal, actually. What was difficult for me was getting used to the tools. Once I got used to using the tools, you can just hit an edge like this and it sharpens. Yeah, this is a sharp edge. It's just not straight. And using the tool takes practice to get really good at removing long flakes. But as far as sharpening the edge, it's not really a big deal. It's sharp right now. Just by doing that. Now, I'm going to go over some beveling. There's only one technique that I use for beveling. And that has like 3 different components to it. It's got to be thick. Your workpiece needs to be thick. A lot of beginners say, okay, I checked that box easy. In 2 seconds, I checked that box. Okay, number 2 is you've got to be able to pressure flake effectively. That might be a little difficult, but it doesn't take that long to develop your muscles to pressure flake. And number 3, I go in one direction and sequentially, right? So my technique for beveling is not random, although it can be. My technique for beveling is not random. It's sequential. So it's got to be thick. You got to know how to pressure flake, and you're going to do a sequential process. Of course, it's got to look right at the end as well. All right, so this is thick, but it's not ready for a sequential flaking. Nope. So how do I get it ready for sequential flaking? Well, I'll show you. Again, beginners, you're gonna have a hard time. But I don't know how to get around it. I've got to show you how to prepare the point or the preform or the workpiece for the final sharpening. Maybe you've already gotten to this point. I don't know if you've gotten to the point where you can thin a piece down. I didn't mean gotten to this point, but if you got to the point where you know how to thin a piece down to a good thinness, and yet you still don't know how to sharpen, I don't know where the disconnect is. Why don't you know how to sharpen when you know how to thin? Thinning is much more difficult than sharpening. I just have to assume that you are not getting the results you think you might want to get, or that you not getting the results that you think are possible. Something is disconnected there if you've already learned how to thin it down. So I'm going to thin this down, assuming that you don't already know how it's done. And then I'll show you how to bevel. Now, how long does it take to get good at removing flakes like this? It takes a while. The shortest I've seen people actually get good at removing these thick turtlebacks and do this kind of flaking is about 3 months. Yeah. I've seen guys get good in about 3 months. Some faster, although I think they might have already had some experience before, but they just didn't do indirect percussion. But yeah, you got to get your workpiece down to a reasonable size, and assuming you're still fairly new to all this stuff, I'll show you how to do this from that perspective, assuming that you're fairly new to all this. And if you're already experienced, you can fast forward it. You don't need to watch this part. But it's important to get this preform or workpiece nice and regular. If you're going to do beveling. Beveling is actually a resharpening technique. I'm not sure that the beveling on the artifacts was done at the first stage of manufacture. I think it's a resharpening technique. So after I get this all regularized, I'm going to dull it like it's been used a lot. And then you not only used a lot, but dulled more on purpose for the beveling type of edge treatment. Okay. This might not be the greatest stone to teach on, but apparently most beginners, they have access to cruddy stone. I'm not saying this is cruddy, but you'll probably be in this boat where it's difficult to get this to where you need it to be. So you'll need to practice thinning on stuff like this. Now I'm assuming that you want to sharpen hunting points and such. Knives, yeah. But this translates to a knife blade as well. But again, the knife blades are not that difficult to sharpen by just hitting the edges with some sort of percussion. If you're getting a lot of crushing, you just got to avoid, learn how to avoid the crushing. Before you can sharpen, you've got to learn how to avoid the crushing. Can you learn to sharpen and avoid crushing at the same time? I don't know. It doesn't seem like those two go together. Because you're going to dull it a lot to avoid crushing. You're going to be grinding and dulling the edge a lot. It doesn't go hand in hand with sharpening. It goes hand in hand with dulling. Yeah. Okay. So I thinned this down to a reasonable extent. It's got to be thick still, right? Okay, so it's still thick, but it's reasonable. Now, is beveling going to show up well on this? Maybe. I think it'll show up okay. All right. So we'll assume that this used to be sharp, and we're dulling it to make the first resharpening pass. Now some guys, they don't want to know how the artifacts were made. They just want to know how to sharpen it because they made a hunting point. Well, I'm going to try to do both. Try to satisfy both the people that want to see an artifact kind of treatment on the edge, and a technique that can sharpen a hunting point or a knife without regard to knowing if it was done in the past or not. Maybe you don't care. So the important thing is just to get it regular. That's what I'm doing now. I'm making it as less, I'm trying to reduce the lumps. I'm trying to make it non-lumpy, but not taking too much time to do it. Let's see, 11 minutes. I need to get rid of that step fracture, so hold on a second. Is this within range of hunting point? Yeah, see, 1.25 inches wide. Usually hunting points need to be about 1 inch wide. Depends on your state and the regulations of your state fishing game department or whatever they call it. Okay. Yeah, that was good. All right, I think we're close enough. Yeah, I just pushed on the front of that step fracture. We're close enough to the shape that we need. Now, what if you don't want it to be thick? Well, just wait for the other sharpening videos. Okay, I'll be doing other types of sharpening. This is just the beveling. Start thick and you can actually see the bevel. If it's really thin, it's hard to see the bevel. All right. So here we go. Got to make sure it's dull. This first pass, I'm going to be removing flakes from both sides because I'm going to make it even more regular than it is now. Regular just means straight and neat. Now, if you're not able to pressure flake like this, you have to practice this kind of pressure flaking. I know in the beginning it was extremely difficult for me to pressure flake without crushing every other flake. So you just gotta practice this. Be able to flake without crushing. Short flakes, and I'm going on both sides because it's still kind of lumpy. I need to treat this other side as well to a pass. Treat it to a pass to get it more neat and straight. Now this down here doesn't sharpen well. This little area, I'm not going to worry. Okay. Now bevels usually favor one side, although you can have a bevel on both sides. We're starting to get into like a diamond cross section type of deal. We're not going to do that type yet. We're just going to favor one side. You can favor both sides and end up with a diamond cross section. That's fine. I think you'll kind of get the idea from this, but I'll do a specific video on that later. And you notice I wasn't using my legs and all that to do this because they're just short flakes. I didn't need extra pressure and go down here and where you know, not only can you not see when I do that, I don't need that much force. If I do show that technique, well, when I do show that technique where you have to really get down in between the two your knees here and really apply pressure and no one can see what you're doing, when I do that technique, I'll show it from the front view and not from this view. So what we're going to do is we're going to favor this side for the bevel, which is the left. It's called a left-hand bevel because it's on the left side. If you look at it with the point up, the left-hand bevel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the way they classify it. Point up, and if the beveling is on the left, it's a left-hand bevel. Is that common? I think the left-hand bevel is pretty common, but it can be either side. If I say one side's more common than the other, I probably will be wrong. Okay. So this is a diamond needle file. It works really well. And this stone is about average for chert. It's raw chert, okay? So you don't have to know how to heat treat. Yeah. I'll go easy on you. It's important that you have fresh metal when you're pressure flaking, and you want to be really careful. If you're pressure flaking and you don't have to be that careful, you can wait. You don't have to freshen up the tip. Okay. All right. So we're gonna do a pass, and you have to put the flaker up on the surface a little bit, and then down, and pay attention to what the results are. Your results may vary. You may have to put your flaker in a different position. But for the most part, up on the surface slightly, not directly on the edge. Up on the surface, and mostly downward pressure. Okay, you're going to get a little bulb of pressure on each one of these. And space them out. This spacing is about 1/8 of an inch. Just space them out. Okay. You can space them as much as you want, or as tight as you want, but I think about 1/8 of an inch apart is good. I'm just eyeballing it, so it might be something different. And I'm not being that careful. So I'm getting little step fractures and stuff. Yeah. You're going to get those little step fractures too. And what you do is you just pick them out. I'm not going to try to get all fancy and do as perfect a job as I can, because I don't expect you as a new guy to know how to pressure flake really, really well. Okay, so I'm just going to do this kind of quickly and not too carefully. Just simple. And make sure that you do have a good edge. Nice and ground down. If it's ground down too much, then what you can do is if it's too flat, you can grind it more this way to make it sharper. You know what I'm saying? Let's say you ground it down like this and you find that it's too hard to pressure flake. Get your file out again and file it in this direction like this. Now, can you do that to begin with? Yes. What is that angle? It's about a 45. To the center plane of the piece, you're going to go at about a 45. Now, if you are going to drive longer flakes, you need to, make it less sharp. But we'll get into that later, I suppose. I try to go like this first, and then if I need to, I'll do that. If doing this isn't working, I will do this. In other words, and not working means if I do it flat, if I do it like this, and I try pressure flaking and it's slipping, or I'm not able to get flakes, or something is not right, then I'll try this angle, see if it works. If not, then I'll just either modify this point, maybe sharper or duller. I'll keep changing up the variables to see what works. Okay. You shouldn't have to change it up too much because this is just simple downward pressure mostly. And look to see what your results are with each flake. If you end up getting a big step fracture, you're going to have to pick it out or start on another piece. Because what you want to do is practice the actual technique of sharpening. If you get distracted by other things, you're going to get kind of miserable. Alright, that's the first pass. Okay. You can already see that there is a bevel effect. And you'll start developing a twist. So we're going to keep on doing this until there's a bit of a twist. Yeah, and I'm knocking off all the edges, and they were sharp. It had little dull spots in between because I didn't knap the entire edge. I spaced them 1/8 inch apart or so, but it was sharp in some areas, in between. In between the abraded spots, there were sharp areas where you beveled. Now, this is the second pass. It gets a little more involved. I'm going to get a little bit more detailed. Okay. Those first passes, they had dull spots in between. Okay. But you got the idea. I spaced them out. But this time, what I'm going to do, I'm going to space them out the same way, but I'm going to remove dull spots from in between. If I see a dull spot. Alright, I'm going to space them out like I did before, but there's a dull spot. I'm going to nap it off. Just little delicate flakes. And if you see that there's an area that needs to be napped with a bigger flake, take a bigger flake. And if you see an area that doesn't need a flake at this time, you can skip over it. Like I'm going to skip over this area because it's already that way a little bit. But then it starts to dip down a little bit here, so I'm going to take a flake here. And get rid of the dull spots. See, I'm going back and getting the dull spots. And if there's a flake like that, I can take that off the other side. Okay. And the more we do this, the more beveled it gets. It's already starting to get that bubbled look to it. So same thing on the other side. Flat grind or at an angle. It's up to you, whatever works. And with steel, this is a steel nail. I don't have to keep resharpening it too much. That's one reason I like to use steel, is because I don't have to keep resharpening this tooltip. Now let me see. How far apart are these? It might be a 1/16 of an inch apart. Yeah, I think they're a 1/16 of an inch apart, not an 1/8 of an inch. But it depends on the size of your workpiece. And I'll go back and I'll remove the dull spots with a little bit of just light pressure, just to get those dull spots off of there. Okay, so that's the basics. I'm going to go into it a little bit more because what's going on here is not only these short flakes, but there's bulbs of pressure, and that bulb of pressure scoops out this side, right? And that scoop out actually makes it sharper. So you got to make sure you have little scoop outs, little bulbs of pressure. Make sure you've got bulbs of pressure going. If the force is too much downward when you're pressure flaking, if it's too much downward, you're not going to get much of a bulb. You got to go slightly inward. So if you're not getting these little bulbs of pressure, start pushing inward a little bit. Okay? All right, are we getting the twist yet? Yeah, we're starting to get a twisty looking tip. All right, so let's say we're going to use this as a knife or whatever back in the day, and it gets dull. Okay, we're going to make it even more dull for the next pass. All right, I'm going to cut the video there and come back to it. I'm going to attach the next segment. We got a visitor, so I got to go open the door. All right. All right, where was I? I think I was abrading this for the next pass. That's what it looks like. Yeah. All right, so the next pass, I am going to sharpen the tip a little bit, just to get it back to where it was when I started. And remove any rock dust or chips. Okay, and just I'll do a final pass, and that'll be it. So I'm spacing these three, hold on, 1/8 to a 1/16 of an inch apart, somewhere in that vicinity. Yeah, that little break. I'm answering the door, and one of the nurses came over, threw me off my game a little bit. Hold on. I'm getting step fractures. Anyway, an 1/8 of an inch to a 1/16 of an inch spacing. And then I'll go back and I'll get in between and get the dull spots. You can be real persnickety and make these flakes exactly the same length once you get lots of practice. It'll make the bevel look even cleaner. What do you do at the very tip? You just make sure it's pointy. When you're done, you can clean it up a little bit like that. But yeah, I'll go back and clean up the dull spots. I can either do it this way or I can do it this way. Just by doing this, I don't even need to look and see if it's actually dull. All I gotta do is make sure I hit all the entire edge. So I can either look and remove flakes. Yeah, I took too much off there. Don't do that. Or I can just nap downward like this. It takes care of the dull spots either way. I did a big flake there because I saw that it was a thick spot, but I took too much off. Okay, to fix it, you know, you just gotta work back the edge. Yeah. Of course, that little mishap doesn't matter too much. But if you want the edge to look nice and neat, yeah, go back and get that. Now you might say, well, this doesn't get it razor sharp. It's not supposed to. It's gonna leave like a jagged sharpness, like a sawtooth sharpness. If you look at it closely, it's not going to be perfectly smooth and straight. It's going to be like sawtoothed or serrated to a certain extent. Okay? It's not perfect. It's not perfectly sharp. Now you can go in there and really be particular about the edge. But if you do too much of this little bitty sharpening, it rounds the edge and removes that little scoop out that the bulbs of pressure are doing to the edge. Those little bulbs of pressure are thinning the very edge, and it's making it sharp. If you do too much picking, it rounds the edge too much. It makes it too round. Okay? So you have to, it's got to be a little bit jagged. You can't be picking at it too much. You got to have a little bit of jaggedness to it. All right? Okay, same on the other side. Now, do you go back and hit the high spots when you do the next pass? Like whenever you see a high spot or a protrusion on the edge, is that the only place I'm pushing on? No, it's not the only place. It's a good place. But for some reason, when I'm doing this pass, I'm getting a lot of step fracturing. Yeah. Which means I need to put a lot more pressure on this. Yeah. There's not enough pressure. All right. Yeah. I got thrown off my game by taking that break. All right, let's see if I can get rid of the steppiness. Bigger, more powerful pressure flakes. And then that one, I can push that one off. Yeah. How did I know to do that? Just from experience. All right, and the tip, let's see, it's getting, the light is not adequate. You can see there's a twist now in the tip, and the bevel is very pronounced. I can go back on this edge that I just did and hit the parts sticking out, because those are the ones that have the dull spots. But don't be too persnickety about it, because you don't want to round the edge like I was saying. You gotta leave it a little bit jagged. And it's not going to be razor sharp. And the artifacts are not razor sharp either. It's just sharp enough. Okay, if you run your finger across it and do it this way, it'll feel like saw teeth. Like most stone edges, they'll catch. They'll feel like there's teeth there. That's what you want. You don't want a smooth edge like what you get from a natural edge on a flake, because you won't be able to get it. You won't be able to get that smooth edge. A napped edge is not like this natural flake edge. You'll never get that. Okay? All right, so that's basically the beveling technique. And you will develop a twist, and you'll notice the bevel a lot more when your workpiece is thick. And you can do it randomly, but I do it sequentially. Does it help? It just helps to space out the flakes to do it sequentially, but no, you can do it randomly, as long as you develop a bevel. There's a distinct angle between the top of the surface of the face and that row of flakes. There's a distinct difference. Okay. Trying to get a good shot of what it looks like. Okay, that's it.